guys, what's up? An amazing move is waiting for you. Do you think that everything has already been used? Well, you're mistaken. There is a top-notch new idea for white by Grandmaster Denis Kadri, my ex-student, champion of Bosnia and Herzegovina, champion of Montenegro, and he came up in the Grand Prix attack with an amazing fifth move, a4. Okay, here and there were some guys who used it before him, but basically he's the one who brought it back into the practice. So let's go. Hopefully you're gonna enjoy this video and tell me what do you think about this system, using it in your practice, and how does it go. I'm sure you're gonna like it a lot. So how does it begin? After like e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, f4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, a4. Yeah, I'd like to remind you of one more thing. In 10 days, I'll be a part of the Chessable TV team. So basically, I'll be a captain of the Chessable team and, believe it or not, even a player. So let's just hope I'll be able to use something like this in the World Rapid and Blitz Championship in London. And by the way, of course, you should root for the Chessable team. So let's go. A4. And after a4, this is pretty surprising. You think makes no sense to play a4 out of nowhere. Well, why should one play a move like a4? What's the point? What's the real thing? What's the real idea behind it? Well, we can put it like this. First of all, that pawn in some variations can be used to be pushed on a5. It's not here, it's not even close to the reality. I just have to show you how does it happen. That's the first thing. Second thing, pawn on a4 is stopping some a6, b5 ideas. Is that one of the main ideas? Of course not. Third thing could be a very big fact for white players, because it's a nice hesitational move where white is just waiting for black to see what is black going to do. So appropriately, we should react based on what is black going to play. And finally, there are here and there a few more like very minor points and ideas behind a4, but I can tell from experience of Grandmaster Kadri that this variation is just a top-notch thing and amazing in practice for white players. So I can't wait for you to actually use it, and this is a very likely to be a top new line in Grand Prix attack for white players for the future. So let's go. After a4, they all go with e6 or d6, or some of these guys react with a6, like I don't know why would you play a6, but to probably prevent bishop b5. If that happens, your bishop, believe it or not, is no longer belongs to the diagonal. First of all, we can take it like a left hook a3 variation, where you want to place your bishop on c4 and go back to a2. And on your question, can we do that? Yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. Then they will for sure play e6, knight g7, and oppose the activity of this bishop. So when you play like d3, knight g7, short castle, d5 to bring it back, and Kadri played a few times. He even won a few games with this, but somehow I just have to tell you that it's okay. I mean, as long as you have this bishop on a2, kind of preventing these b5 ideas, having a shelter on a2 for the bishop, it's okay for white. So you can't complain about this one. Although, there is another thing. I believe on a6, you can now say, okay, if I can come with my bishop to b5 to threaten bishop takes c6, or maybe some similar Grand Prix modern ideas, I want to go with d3, in which case I'm kind of locking my light square bishop, but I want to apply a completely different type of plan and idea for white. So whenever you lock the light square bishop, you just have to go with a kingside attack in a famous and pretty much known fashion. So when they go d6, you go bishop e2, you go castles, and when this happens, you go with the queen e1. This reminds me of British Grand Prix, and British Grand Prix, you have it here on the channel. you can find it. E4, C5, bishop E2. So when they play knight C6, you play F4. And then you go knight F3, D3, castles, and you play it like this. I'm just saying it's similar to that one. In this variation, when you play A4 and they go A6, you just go with, just like I told you, bishop C4, which reminds me of Serbian system against English opening reversed, or D3, where you just locked your light square bishop, go with bishop E2 and go with the queen E1. Queen E1 for two reasons. Because yes, you'd like to go with the queen E1, F5, bishop H6, knight G5, typical Grand Prix attack. But at the same time, there is one new, it's more like computer type of idea, but it's not computer idea in its classic sense of that word, because if you ever played Dutch defense, you should be familiar with the next plan by white. So after castles, you bring the knight back to D1. I know it looks crazy, but it's going to give you a couple of things. First of all, it should give you like a better control of, the D4 square. Like at some point you can play maybe C3 if you need it. I'm not so happy with those C3 ideas. But from another point of view, there's something way more important and that I like much more about this game. Actually, what am I talking about? I'm actually talking about repositioning this knight via E3 or mainly via F2 to go into the attack on the king side. So now it also reminds of some King's Indian positions. I'll show you, for example, one game between two GMs. The guy played knight D4, threatening on C2. You gotta take. Unfortunately, now you don't have a backup bishop D1 to defend on C2, like in British Grand Prix attack. So after knight E4, C takes D4, boom, C4. What's so important about C4? By locking the game on the queen side, you're actually going to have an upper hand on the king side. And that's why they take, B takes, bishop D7, D4. By playing with the pawns on C3 and D4, you're kind of not just locking, but also killing the activity of the bishop on G7. So after bishop C6, E5, now this bishop is definitely killed, although this bishop on C6 and the knight on F5 will do some very harmful things to us. So after bishop A3, rook E8, bishop F3, H5, knight to E3, removing and repositioning the knight from F5. It's nothing that special, but from another point of view, if you take a look at this position, I definitely prefer white. Why? I want to take on F5 and double your pawns. You probably have to take, in which case I'm going to play H3 and G4. Once I play H3 and G4, why do I have to play H3 and G4? Because I always have to back up the G4 possibility to recapture by pawn, H takes G4. And once I do it, I got to push and break with F5. That's why I'd say that white is a little bit better, not a little bit better. White has promising chances in this type of the game. Also, take a look at the pawn on D6. They also have to take care about the pawn on D6. So they probably have to take, in which case we take by F pawn, in which case we would open up the F file and then we can double up our rooks on the F file. So it's difficult position from practical point of view for them. Once again, on A6, you can play typical English attack plan against, Serbian attack plan against English defense, just reversed colors. So you're just hiding your bishop on A2 and go with the queen E1, queen H4, F5 and stuff like that. Or you can just lock your light square bishop and go with the kind of British Grand Prix attack plan with the queen E1, queen H4, but also repositioning knight via D1 to F2 and at the same time facing any knight D4 with knight takes D4 followed by C4. Don't forget about that. Another thing is D6. D6 is one of those classic, let's call it dragon type of moves, flexible type of moves, looks logical. You're opening up the light square bishop, getting everything. And now, this was the moment when I told you that fifth move A4 we can take as some sort of nice and smart waiting move for white, because you're just waiting for your opponent to react. And when he reacts, just like he does in this position, you can just go with some sort of idea whether you want to place your bishop on C4 or you want to do it on B5. And here you're just placing your bishop on B5. What for? Well, I'm gonna show you lots of games that I tried after I learned about this idea by analyzing games of Kadri. So after bishop b5, let's imagine they go logical, developing move knight f6. They do not care about our bishop on b5. Well, watch out, my man. You gotta be very, very careful what you're doing. So we take on c6. And when we take on c6, we create double pawns. And when we create double pawns, now we gotta go with a typical Grand Prix attack plans. And how can we get a benefit from having the pawn on a4 in this position? Let me show you. You just go d3, castles, castles. And if we manage to do queen e1 followed by b3, our position is going to be amazing. So what's so special about the queen e1? Queen e1 is going to defend the knight on c3. If I play b3 at this moment, okay, it's black to move. But if I play b3 here, they will have knight takes e4. And they would open up the bishop on g7, win the pawn, and would be able to take advantage of the bad knight on c3 and work on a1. That's why, instead of, that's why they have to react, appropriately here, and they just have to fight against the queen e1 b3 idea. So let's go. Let's say they go bishop a6. Bishop a6 and having the bishop on light square bishop in these type of broken pawn structure positions in the Grand Prix attack is always a big problem for black players, and they just try to solve it by either bishop g4 or bishop a6. In case of bishop a6, they want to play some c4 at some point. Unfortunately, you can't play b3 because to cement c4 possibility, yes, you would cement it, but you would actually go after the tactics, and don't forget about this. Otherwise, you might regret this video and this opening choice, and I don't want to be badly, sweared by you guys. So I told you, I warned you, watch out on b3 94 ideas. So what do you have to do? You gotta go with queen e1. It's typical. We're overprotecting e4. We're overprotecting, much more importantly, it's to protect the knight on c3. And now I want to go with b3. Why do I want to go with b3? Because in that case, I would definitely, lock the light square bishop for black for the entire game. And the thing is, if you ever play c4, I just have to play d4, in which case this one is locked forever. And in which case, bishop on g7 is pretty bad piece, and it also doesn't have like a special activity in this game either. So that's what you have to do. Remember, queen e1 followed by b3 gives you an amazing game. On your question, what are we supposed to do later? I'm going to answer that question after I show you what if bishop g4. In bishop g4, play h3. Win the bishop pair. Ideally, play bishop d2, rook a2 e1, b3, so they can never do anything with rook b8, cope with a b2 pawn, and put a king on h1 and decide whether you want to break with e5, f5, or even build up some sort of the attack on the king side related with some g4 pawn star. That's it. I want to show you one more thing in this position. If instead of bishop g4, bishop a6, they also make kind of nice, useful move, rook b8, where we can develop our dark square bishop, but of course we do nothing else but queen e1. I want to play b3 next. I promised you I'm gonna tell you what should you do in positions like this and how should you react. Any bishop a6 now would be a piece of cake for us, because forever we're locking up the light square bishop and they can't play c4. They don't even have the knight e4 because the queen on e1 defends the knight. If they play bishop g4, I don't care anymore because I'm not pinned. So I can even consider some crazy knight h4 ideas, followed by f5. That's how I won in one Blitz tournament here in Serbia game, 5-minute game, against pretty good player 2200. And you can, of course, go back to knight e2, once again threatening f5 and to play h3, in which case they would have to bring the knight back, and then you can just carry on with your plans. And finally, if they ever play d5, you always, without any hesitation, should go with e5, and for the rest of the game, go after the c5 pawn. Unlike some other positions, when the pawn is not on a4, here we can really take advantage of the pawn on a4. And I promise you, I'm going to explain you some ideas behind the pawn on a4 and some positive sides. So when they play like knight e7 or whatever, you should be going with a3 or first a5 at here point. The point is, you want to go with a5, b3, bishop a3, knight a4, queen f2, and go after the pawn on c5. Okay, here and there, you can just change the order of moves and play even more subtle ideas there, but I'm just telling you, this is the plan you're going for. On your question, Maya, are we going to have some problems with the pawn on a5 once we play b3, knight f4? First of all, you shouldn't have problems because the queen is defending the pawn. But let's imagine it's not even defending the pawn. And in many of these lines, you're just giving it up. Why? Because then you're going to get an open a file for the rook on a1. They will have problems with an open a file, with our rook on a1, with a possibly weak pawn on a7. And yes, we do get an a for a square for our knight. That's why we pushed our pawn up to a5, and then we just want to play bishop a3, queen f2, going after the c5 pawn. After bishop e5, let's say they go e6. E6 is always kind of risky because of d6 weakness. I know it sounds great, sounds crazy, but you take on c6, creating double pawns, and whenever you see a pawn structure like this, I intentionally put a red colors on c5 and c6, and yellow on d6, and okay, e6 doesn't deserve that. So what do you do here? Typical e5. It's a typical e5 break. You want to take, in which case they would be left with 3 pawn islands after we take, and afterwards we should just have an easy game against the c5 pawn, or they can go with d5, and then you just play famous a5, and we're giving up this pawn for an open a file and knight f4 and bishop a3 and the better pressure against the c5 pawn. So whatever they do, like knight h6, let's say they develop, I play b3. You defend it, I go bishop a3. You say, I want to take it. I don't care, my friend. Take it, be my guest. I get an open file. You'll have a problem on the a file, with an open file, with a pawn on a7, but more importantly, you're going to have problems with this pawn. How? Well, I'll play knight a4, but here I want to first play queen c1. What's the point of having my queen on c1? I just want to over defend some of my pieces. I'd like to go with, I even have some ideas, queen b2, queen c, knight a4, queen b2, queen c3, going after the pawn. But you also can play in these positions, something like queen e2, for example. I don't like a little bit bishop a6 in some of these positions, but even if that one happens, there is a move like the bishop e2, but let's forget about that. I just want to tell you that this one exists with the idea of queen f2 going after the knight a4 and the pawn on c5. Although the top move here is queen c1. And one guy tried c4, avoiding b3, kinda avoiding b3 and d3, and more importantly, getting rid of weakness on c5. That doesn't save the day. You just have to play d3. Now you're threatening to take and to create weakness. They gotta take your recapture. Now when they play knight h6, bishop e3, we're just getting an amazing control of the dark squares with our pieces. So after this knight a4, you even sack the pawn, you go king e2, and you say, buddy, you're mine. I want to play queen c2, queen d2 even, to exchange queens, not a problem. a7 is weak, c6 is weak. I want to play rook h to c1, and you will permanently have problems, not to mention that I'm threatening knight b6 to win the game and on the spot. So just like you see, so many nice refreshing things in this new a4, as I like to call it, Kadri Grand Prix attack. And finally, bishop d7. They're just keeping an eye on the knight on d4. It's okay, not a problem. You go castle, and they go a couple of moves. Whenever I play bullet games, somehow on autopilot, my opponents go with knight e4, and that's not a good move. That's very interesting. You play d3. Here, there's an amazing game between Kadri and Musar, played in European Championship last year, and Kadri won an amazing game. So look at this one. E6 happened in that game. I just want to tell you that knight h6 is the way to develop your pieces, but then you have this killer f5. And you're always going to give up this bishop for the knight, so you never care, for example, if they take it on b5 by knight, for example. I don't care. I mean, I'm fine with that. I'm just opening file and everything is good. If you want to win the pawn on b5, you got to give up the dark square bishop for the knight on c3. And that's not going to happen with existing knight on h6 as well. So those are not a good options. So when they play like knight b5, 8 takes b5, you're great. If bishop b5, 8 takes b5, I'll show you the game. The guy found a way to reposition his knight and to put it back into the game. h3, knight f6, looks like he's fine. Bishop e3, kicking the knight away from the center. Knight f3, queen f3, and castles. And everything looks okay, seemingly fine position for both sides. Maybe white is just a little bit better thanks to the open a file. Well, that's not a case. White is a lot better here. Why? Because you have an e5 break. And when you play e5 break, you're threatening the knight and also the pawn on b7. D takes queen b7. Queen b7 you take, knight d5, jumping into the center, going after the pawn. After a6, taking, rook f8, knight c7, threatening like this. And this was the game between Arashchenko, who's nowadays almost 2700 GM from Ukraine, against Shilin, and Shilin went on to win in just 6 moves. I'm just going to briefly show you what happened in the game. Arashchenko tried to defend this position, but even by sacking a piece, but this guy outcalculated him and won this game very convincingly. Ukrainian championship in Sevastopol 2000. Very, very lovely game. So knight d4 is not a good option. Now you would say, and what about e6? To back up knight on c6 with knight g7. Boom! Immediately f5. You gotta do it. And if they play knight f6, just take on g6, play d3 followed by bishop g5. If they play knight g7, just take on e6, and if f takes e6, knight g5, and send them home because they're just completely lost and they cannot just threaten all these weaknesses at the same time. And finally, if they go with bishop e6, d4, this is Kadri's game, who had a lot better position here in his game in Rapid Tournament in Sarajevo 2023. Bishop pair, better game, and he just had to play rook e1 here to avoid exchanging and support some bishop e3 and bishop c4 ideas with a better game for white. Just like you see so many nice things in this one. By the way, Nigel Short played against Grandmaster Vignesh f5, e takes f5. You don't play d3 like in classic Grand Prix when the bishop is on c4, but you take on f5 and somehow you force them. If they play knight g7, boom, f6. That was my Blitz game. But okay, to be honest with you, I was familiar with this trick. Knight e4, threatening the bishop and the pawn. When my opponent went with knight f5, I just played g4, kicking the knight away and weakening the bishop on f6. And here I played c3, and I was completely winning. And eventually, not eventually, in a couple of moves, I won the game. So just like you see, they gotta take by bishop, but when they take by bishop, first, we've opened up the f-file, and they have problems with f7 pawn. Second, c6 is weak. We play d4. That's how we take advantage of the c6 weakness. Take by knight, threaten both knight and the bishop. So for the pawn sack, we're now running initiative. Knight g7, bishop g5, still threatening on c6. Queen b6, bishop e3. This is how Nigel Short played against this guy. But I believe that after knight d4, you already can, after knight g7, for example, put your okay, bishop g5, queen b6, bishop e3, and now you don't have to make draw. These guys may draw. You can play a little bit differently, and you can play on compensation in that game. And finally, if after bishop b5, bishop d7, short castle, knight f6, so once again, knight d4, you don't react, you just play d3. I forgot to show you the Kadri game. I apologize to you. So if e6, I just showed you knight h6. If e6, Kadri played d5. So he's breaking these pawns and forcing his opponent to do what? Forcing his opponent to do d5. In which case, he would exchange, and create forever weakness on d4. Then you're just winning this pawn and you're up a pawn. So Musar took on b5, a takes b5, and played d5. Kadri played d4, and now he's playing like a good version of some French or some other positions or similar to that one. This guy played b6, played bishop e3, threatening on c5, queen c8, and he played rook a6. He can't play bishop b5, knight b5, queen a6 because of knight c7, and the queen would be gone. Okay, the guy, also rook a6 is a very nice move where you're fixing the weakness on a7 and would like to play queen a1 afterwards. That's exactly what happened. Musar played c4, Kadri played queen a1, brought a bishop back to f2 so he can play also bishop h4. Knight a7, played queen to a3, not allowing this guy to make castle because the knight would be hanging. Bishop c8, going after the rook and defending the knight. Rook a4, and here Kadri played b4, safeguarding the queen and threatening to triple pieces and go after the pawn on a7. Musard captured. He sacked the knight and you cannot take it. Rook c1, queen a2, removing from some potential threats. Rook a1, bishop e1, queen a3, queen c1, and now he absolutely changed the destiny. This guy was defending him very, I would say, nicely and stubbornly on the queen side, and then Kadri realized that he moved all the black pieces onto the queen side, so it's time to do it and to reposition his pieces. He played rook a2 to play rook c2, and all of a sudden to take advantage of the x-rays against the queen. Played queen e3, queen d3 to break eventually with some f5, played rook g2, and look how carefully he was repositioning all his pieces, and he killed his opponent like this in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful style, because Musar couldn't defend from rook h8 and bishop before. He just resigned the game. I just showed you a little bit faster this game, but it's absolutely terrific attack by white. Also, the game itself was high quality, and Kadri absolutely destroyed his opponent with his lines. And finally, enter d6, bishop b5, bishop d7, castles. What's happening if they, instead of knight d4, where we play d3, instead of e6, where we play f5, what if they play normal developing move, knight f6? Well, you play d3, castle, and now you can just go with the things I explained you previously. You can just go with either bishop c6, followed by typical plans, bishop c6, and then you just go with the queen e1, queen h4, f5, bishop h6, knight g5, which is the typical, nothing else but the GPA, Grand Prix attack. Another thing is, I want to lock the light square bishop, play h3, you're wondering what for. Lots of these guys like to play knight e4, and then to play a game like this, in which case you can just bring the bishop back here, or just play bishop e3, kicking the knight away, forcing them to take, because you know how much we're happy if we open up a file. Or if they don't do that, but for example play knight f3, then you take by queen, and once again, just like in game Shilin against Arashchenko, you would like to break with e5, or if they ever captured, to recapture like this and to have a very, very nice chances along the a file. So time to show you the last possibility, and it's e6. Lots of guys play e6 to back up knight on c6 with knight g and e7. We go with e5. That's one of the points of this system, and that's one of the crucial things, because we're just trying to take advantage of the bishop being on g7 and going after the d6 square and the c5 weakness afterwards. So what does it mean? It means if they play a6 to avoid knight b5, or let's just say bishop b5, but we're not talking about these ideas now with the light square bishop. We're talking about jumping with a knight on b5 or e4. We have now knight e4, threatening check, b3, to be able to play bishop b2 or bishop a3. It will depend on black's reaction. Take on d6, where we threaten bishop e2. Play bishop a3, where we threaten pawn, and we're always happy to exchange sack. I mean, to sack an exchange and to win a game like this. So when b6, you just go with d4, opening up the bishop, going after the c5, kind of not locking, but opening up the game for your pieces. After f5, this one, if queen d6, knight c4, black is just winning in this position. By the way, consider they can never take on a1. Well, in the case of knight e4, you just go knight c4, threatening the pawn b6, controlling this one, but more importantly, and just getting a full support for the pawn on d6, which stands in this position like a bone in black's throat. And that's all about a6. Then they have d5. On d5, we're just going to play kind of French defense with the terribly placed dark square bishop and weak g6. If they play c takes d4, knight b5, we're amazing. If they play a6 to avoid knight b5, we play knight e2, and we're amazing because we can either and solidify the pawn structure with c3 and recapture the pawns, or if they take, we're going to take, play c3, bishop a3, bishop e3, a5, and get like full control of the center and the dark squares in the classic fashion. If they play knight g on e7, you go knight e4, and this is game Kadri Drašković, castle h4 with the idea h5. Reminds me a little bit of Serbian attack against the English system. For all of you who don't know what am I talking about, find on the channel. It's one of the most attractive options for black against the English opening lately, and it creates lots of problems to white players. So after knight f5, you go g4, and Grandmaster Drašković played d5. Kadri played knight f6, took on f5. Now the bishop was hanging. Played f6, locking the bishop, and after d3, bishop g2, bishop d2. My great friend, Grandmaster Luka Drašković, couldn't find a better move, but he decided to sack a piece, and eventually he won the game in Montenegro Championship 2023. So just like you see, they can play d5, knight e7, a6, and they have to break in the center with d6. If that happens, you have a beautiful bishop e5. What's the point? Point is that you can't take on e5. We take on c6, creating lots of weaknesses in black's camp. F takes e5. Now we're opening up this bishop for further actions. They have this terrible pawn. They have this terrible d6 square. And after queen e2, where we just overprotect the pawn on e5, b3 followed by bishop a3 and knight e4, for example, altogether with a short castle, it's completely winning. If bishop b5, d5, like let's try to avoid knight e4 ideas because it's really kind of devastating for them. You take on c6, famous way of creating weakness, and you know by now that we always play a5, taking advantage of the pawn on a4 and going with knight a4 and go after the pawn on c5. Knight e7, b3 castles, bishop a3, going after the pawn, queen a5, and knight a4, and they're just going to be absolutely broken apart afterwards, and it's amazing position for white. And finally, bishop b5, knight g on e7, knight e4, d takes, f takes, castles. I played a game. I gotta tell you proudly that I played a nice blitz game here. My opponent went for castle. Knight f5 is bad because you always take and you never miss a chance to create these pawns. It's not about to win the pawn on c5, as how important it is to take on c6, break these pawns, and afterwards to enjoy playing against these bad pawns. So after d3 castles and bishop g5, you're just having like a full control of the dark squares and the f6 square. After d takes, f takes castles, you just go knight f6 check. They go king h8. Bishop f6 is out of question. We just want a bishop pair in control of the dark squares. And on top of all that, you always take on c6, and I don't want to talk about these positions if they just have a problem with our dark square bishop, if they just have problems with the dark squares for themselves. King is kind of weak. This pawn is now used as a good pawn to always push it on a5 and create some, I don't know, ideas against this pawn on c5, so it's almost winning. My opponent went for king h8, and I knew as a part, I was just remembering the last move in the analysis, it's d4, breaking in the center. I just knew that he cannot take by knight, my opponent, because c3, and when they play like knight f3, I would just take by queen, and taking by queen is nice, but you know what? This is kind of interesting. Taking by queen, somebody just told me that you can even, no, don't do that. I mean, keep the queen, go with the queen on h3 and go for the checkmate, bishop g5, knight b5. you just take and play knight g5 threatening mate. When they play rook f8, a takes b5 with an open a file, weakness on a7, f7, h7. This position is completely winning. You just play castle and they can never take because you just want to go with rook a4 and rook h4 checkmate. Anyways, my opponent went for c takes d4. I played bishop g5. This is what I remembered from the analysis. And he made a mistake. He felt very annoyed by the bishop and played h6. I played h4, threatening. So if you take, it's mate. It's a very nice way of mating the king, but the guy realized actually what was my real intention. It was h5. And that's how I found a way to break it there. He played knight f5. I played bishop takes e6, played queen d2. He couldn't stop h5, h takes g6, followed by checkmate on h6. And soon after, he resigned the game. If you ask me, so what's the best move here? The best is queen a5, queen d2, and after king d2, white has a very nice game. If you ask me what should be the plan here, if they ever move the knight from e7, take on c6, play h4, and launch the attack. If on any, for example, like knight d5, bishop c6, h4, they play like this, go with g4 and break on the king's side. Guys, I hope you enjoyed in this lecture. This is something really nice on the channel that you can find, and even some way better players than even me can find lots of useful lines and ideas in this video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you're gonna enjoy these lines. Bye bye.